All right. Good morning, Dan. Home from the islands, huh? It sounds like some great bow hunting, man.
Yeah, yep. Another 50-pound cooler is home, and brought some antlers home too, and just a ton of memories and awesome hunting. It was really awesome.
Well, it made for like such a great conversation because I've been bear hunting so much. You've been hunting axis and red deer, and so it's like just in the forefront of our mind, like the little nuances to the stalks, to the wind, to the making plays, like what's important, sound, and like everything. So I really enjoyed today's conversation, like being so fresh in our minds like that.
Yeah, no, it was really good, and I think we both had small epiphanies of we have weaknesses, and we want to work on them, and we disclosed them in the podcast, and I think guys can, you know, learn from us and learn from our little mistakes, and it's things that I know you're going to be working on this summer before bow season, and I'm sure as heck going to be working on too, and if you're not getting better, you're only getting worse, and that's being humble and critiquing yourself and learning from every experience, whether it's good or bad when it comes to bow hunting, whether it's a miss or it's a punch tag, learning from those experiences and applying those to future hunts. That's the only way to become a better bow hunter. And that's why I think today was another powerful podcast. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, 100%. Like so much good information in there. And then we also disclosed like our Super Bowl hunts for the season. And we talked about what those hunts are and how we're preparing. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. So great conversation. We'll get right into it. We just want to thank sponsor for today's show. We want to thank Team Lodge. So man, those guys are building great trailers and you have some personal experience using them, Dan. Tell me a little bit about them.
Yeah. Team Lodge for guys that don't know, it's a trailer company. They make trailers to sleep in. Like they're not camper trailers. I almost said camper trailers, but you see them back east. They're like trailers that they sit down, and originally they were used for ice fishing. Like you pull them out onto the ice, and then there's some hydraulics, and you like set them down on the ice. And it's the same concept, except for they're building them by hand for hunting and just Western living, whether you're a hunter, 4x4ing, hiking, or just camping. They're a toy hauler. I mean, that's ultimately, probably the largest advantage to them is not only can you sleep in them and they're designed so well, but you can haul your e-bikes, your dirt bikes, your side by side, you name it. You can haul all your gear in them as well. And they have all these different sizes. So anyway, very innovative, very handy. And I'm not the type of guy that like hunts out of a trailer every single hunt, but there's some hunts that they're not backcountry hunts, and you have a base camp, and maybe you're using a dirt bike or a four-wheeler or e-bikes, and so they're perfect for the style of hunting that we do. And I know I can speak for you too half the time too. We don't do all backcountry hunts.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, to have like a base camp and then like I have a side by side that I'll take on hunts or a dirt bike and something that I can park in there and then also camp in there. So lowering it to the ground, it's not going to rock around in the wind so much. It's going to keep its temperature better. And it's just so easy and convenient, especially like my family doesn't like to camp in tents it's a huge production to set up a wall tent, get the stove hooked up. It's like when you can just pull a trailer, especially if you're day hunting, and even if you are backpacking a couple, 2-3 days in, to have a base camp that you can come back to and cook a good dinner. And then you just don't have the production of the setup or the pickup. You pretty much pull it up there, drop it off, set it to the ground, and you're good to go. And so, man, they're a huge game changer. And so, yeah, we appreciate those guys at Team Lodge. They're building great products. I got to check it out at the Western Hunting Expo, and then I've heard you and Guy also talk about them as well and using them. And so yeah, I think it's like a great option for guys for base camp down low. And you said you talked to the owner the other day, and he's running a special for guys on the podcast, right?
Yeah. So we talked about this new idea that he had. His name's Michael. Great guy, great family. Him and his brother Eric. They're from Wyoming originally, but they're in South Dakota now. I've hunted with them. Just they share the same passion that we do for bow hunting. And so I love these guys, but he came up with the idea that if guys that are listening to the podcast, if you end up buying a trailer, he's going to buy you a new gun of your choice, or he would buy you a bow, I'm sure. But yeah, we're working out the details on that, but be listening on some of these future episodes for some of these incentives that Team Lodge is putting together for our podcast listeners. And so, yeah, it's huge. And it's amazing the variety that they have everywhere from like a 10-foot trailer. Actually, I think they have a 6-foot trailer, like a really short one, all the way up to a 20-footer. Okay, so their shortest one's a 9-foot trailer. So 9 to 20 foot, and they have like, let's see here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different models, and I'm probably missing one. The Mountain Lander. They're coming out with new stuff all the time. So it doesn't matter what style or what size you're looking for, they have it. So they're the real deal. And they also, I was going to note too, on Guy's moose hunt, we slept in him for 12 days on his moose hunt. And it's like sleeping in a bunker. Like, you don't hear outside noises. They're grizzly bear proof, and your trailer's not rocking from the wind. They're like little bunkers that you like set down on the ground, and they don't move. They're stable. So they're insulated great. Like all these positives that they have that just like a normal, tin can camper trailer doesn't have. So yeah, so many cool things coming from these guys. It's a great family-owned business. Couldn't be happier to be partnering with them in products that we truly believe in. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's stoked to have them on board for the podcast, and just great guys, and great products that they're producing. So check those guys out. And if you happen to buy one, make sure you mention that you heard it on the podcast, because it could be a free rifle or bow for you. So yeah, check that out. We also we've been working really hard on the Mule Deer Collective, Elk Collective. I saw you released a new video on the Mule Deer Collective about boning out animals and being able to debone them. I think it's from a mule deer hunt from last year. So I saw you added that to the course, and we've got a bunch of new content we're adding. I can't wait for all the Elk Collective, all the Mule Deer Collective stuff that we kind of filmed together and put out. Just great content in there. So yeah, good work, Dan.
Yep. Several new videos that are going to be dropped here by the end of June. So give me a few more weeks. I've been working hard on those in between hunts. I haven't even been spring bear hunting yet, Brian. I mean, I'm a little jealous. You've been out running the hills. I mean, I've been bow hunting too, but I've been working on new content and staying really busy in the office, busting out this stuff. And it's going to be good. We've got lots of good stuff coming. I did trickle in some new videos into the Deer Collective, but yeah, tons of additions this year. Some hunting to do in between, but we appreciate you guys that subbed last week. And Beyond the Grid, new season coming up in July as well. Like, there's all this new stuff that's like about to happen the end of June into July. So it's super exciting. I'm all amped up. I don't need caffeine anymore because I'm so amped up about bow hunting and this content. It's so fun to put together. It's so fun to talk about. So what am I missing?
So is that, can guys still like use that code from last week, man? It was such a great money saver that you dropped on the podcast. Is that still operational?
Yeah. So the code is Anchor, and there are about 30 guys that have used it, and I'm actually going to turn it off next week because it is 75% off. So you can get the Elk Collective for $25. You get the Deer Collective for $25, 75% off both of them, but I am going to turn it off. So get it while you can. It's going to go away. It's kind of our last minute special that we did. We appreciate your guys' support, but yes, it is going to be turned off soon, the Anchor code. So in checkout, you type in Anchor and you'll get 75% off.
Okay. Awesome, Dan. So the new season Beyond the Grid, I cannot wait for your elk episode to drop. I'm really stoked at one of the mule deer episodes I saw edited for myself. So yeah, check out the old seasons on there. A bunch of great bulls, bucks, a bunch of great hunting. So check that out. Be on the lookout for the new season. Check out the other podcasts we're doing. And man, the magazines, Eastman's Bowhunting Journal, Eastman's Hunting Journal, me and Dan are writing an article where we're arguing over our backcountry tactics right now. So that'll be coming out in the new EBJ, but we're always putting our heart and soul into those articles. So you can check out the magazines there. And man, I think that's it. Let's get into this podcast.
Heck yeah, let's do it, man.
Okay. Well, dude, looked like an epic trip to Hawaii, huh?
Dude, best hunting I've had there in quite a long time.
What? Sure. Best hunting you've had? That's saying something, man. You've been hunting that place for 15 years. It must have been off the hook. Like rut was perfect and then a bunch of good bucks around.
Yeah. The rut was just money. I don't know, a couple estrus does going or something. The last part of the trip, you kind of did see changes in their behavior and their movement with that full moon coming up, and it was up all night, and they just weren't on their feet as much in the evening. Morning was good, but not so much in the evening. So I think between that and then pressure from surrounding areas, like hearing gunshots going off, like, you know, some of the other ranches or they're hunting or outfitting or whatever's going on, I don't know. But yeah, just more pressure other areas. And, you know, I'm hunting these residential areas. I mean, it's not like I'm hunting by houses, but they're like 20 to 40 acre parcels. And these deer, they seek refuge in there because of some of the rifle pressure going on. And so I think that's ultimately what made it better. It was just a culmination of all those things. And then, yeah, the rut obviously helped, but just phenomenal. It was so fun. And, you know, there's so many bucks, and there were good numbers this year of does as well, like big numbers of does, but a lot of young bucks, a lot of up and comers, and then just a few that were, you know, what you're looking for over 30. So it was still a challenge, all those eyeballs. But this stuff that I'm hunting too, it's just, I was telling my coworker Todd here yesterday about it, and it's just like a perfect storm of this property has all come together with those factors. And then the lantana growing up, it's kind of like the cat's claw thorn. So you have like all this good ground cover for sneaking, and then you have the terrain, and you have like rocks and caves, and so it's set up so beautifully for bow hunting. So as long as you have the wind as your Achilles heel in there, it can be goofy because it's kind of on the backside of a hill, and you get the trade winds, and so it kind of swirls on the backside, you know, the leeward side of the hill from that trade wind. And so you got to be careful with that. But other than that, money. It was money.
Dude, that's so fun. Well, even when it is really good hunting and set up for bow hunting, it's still extremely difficult. Those animals are so switched on, especially like you said, all the eyes and things. It looked like you killed a couple great bucks over there. Do you mind telling me how long they were? Like, I have my guesses, but it looked like that last one you shot went close to 32.
Yeah, he was 31 and change. That bigger one with the big brow.
He looked like it.
Yeah, and then the other
wide one too, man. Just like the frame was so pretty on him.
Yeah, he's built so perfect. Yeah, so perfect. Heavy. He looks shorter than what he is because he's heavier than my 31-inch buck, actually. So, yeah, no, great bucks for sure.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, I was so pumped for you. It looks like it was pretty green over there too. Like you caught the green up nice. That helps with noise, and then also helps with cover when it's not just barren, dry grass.
Yeah, and I've hunted that before where, you know, it's been so dry in there, and it's just crunchy grass or dirt, you know. And so, yeah, a little bit of the ground cover was nice. They had some good rain about 2 months ago, and then it was dry for quite a while, and then they just got dumped on like 2 weeks ago. And so things were like really popping and greening up the week prior. And the worst mosquito year ever I've had there too. The mosquitoes were bad, and usually they're not that bad because it's so dry. But the green up was good. It was good.
Yeah, it's awesome. I've got my ticket spot, so I'll be headed out hunting access. I'll be the tail end of the rut, which can be a tough time to hunt them, but then I'm so hooked on those mouflon sheep. I just love hunting those things. They're such a riot. I love like having all that area I love, I always say steep lava rock canyons, but it is like it's extreme terrain, which I love hunting, where it's really steep and then their eyesight is just so good. So I love hunting those things. So it'll be a bit of a combo trip. So I'll be a little late on access, but my buddies definitely have some good spots or have some spots lined up. So I'll get some axis hunting and then some mouflon. And they're also switched on. Man, it just sharpens your skills so much for deer and elk. And I've told you I've been hunting bears quite a bit. It's been really fun. And I've had some chances and most of the time make a big long play and then I don't catch up to him. But I had the perfect scenario the other day where a chocolate was he hardly moved 20 yards and he kind of moved into the edge of the timber. And so I waited for him to show back up and he showed back up. So within about 20 minutes, he just hadn't moved anywhere. He's just feeding right there. I'm like, oh man, this is my chance. And I sent it over there, had a cameraman for a couple days. I was trying to capture it. So there was two of us. And I really stalked up to the spot and then didn't see him. And I just lost a little bit of focus. I was going to hunt after him and I figured he was still around, but I just wasn't moving as slow and as quiet as I should have been. And it was fairly still. And I think he was either bedded above me in the timber on the ridge or just maybe feeding and I didn't see him first. And he must have heard me going through the dry grass. There was two of us too, which is a little bit more difficult, and busted him. And, I'd then still hunted a bunch of bear areas and I caught there's a bunch of bulls in there. And, usually I don't bother them. I try not to spook anything. I leave it all natural. But sometimes there's a bull right in front of you, the direction you're headed. And it's oh, well, let's, practice our stalking and see how close we can get. And it's good practice with my new cameraman or this kid that's been coming with me a bit. He filmed some in Idaho for me last year. But anyways, it's a good practice to stalk them and with two people or whatever. But it just reminds me how on your game you have to be. Here I've been trying to kill this bear. I finally get one that hangs around and I end up duffing the opportunity because I was, and I was still moving slow. It just wasn't slow enough or still enough. It's man, you just can't be too careful. And I'm sure that's in the forefront of your mind because axis deer just sharpen my skills so much because they don't let you get away with anything. So you really are practicing your stalking skills and honing those instincts and trying to get shots, man. It just sharpens your skills so much for coming into our Western seasons, man. There's just nothing better.
Yeah. No, that's ultimately, why I started going over, to Hawaii was just to really sharpen my skills. But yeah, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it, you still get humbled. And I had a similar experience over there hunting axis where it was a foolish mistake. And I was sitting trail because it was so thick and this buck was roaring. I mean, it was becoming evening time and they don't roar whether you call it screaming or roaring or bugling or, whatever you want to call it. They're red stag, in comparison, red stag, during estrus, they're just roaring, or fallow deer. They're giving away their location constantly. And then elk, they can do the same thing if they're fired up, bugling nonstop. But most of the time they're probably not. They're listening more, they're bugling every now and again. And so you got to be a little bit more careful. And axis, when they scream, they don't just scream repetitively when they're in estrus. They still, for example, a big bull say he's on a hot cow and he's smelling her and following her, and they'll do their classic, nose in her tail and give her a little push and then stop and just rip out a bugle. And axis don't really do that. It's when they scream, they're screaming when they're not as active on estrus. This is in my experience. And when I've seen bucks on estrus and nosing does and really checking them, they're locked in and dialed and they're not making as much noise. And so they're a little bit more difficult to pinpoint in my experience than a red or an elk. And so I'm sitting trail and this buck roars and I'm man, he's kind of close. And I'm in between him and where he wants to go for feeding and to check does. So I know I'm in a good spot and I have a good wind. So I'm just going to stay put. And then probably 10 minutes later, he screams again, and he's much closer. So I know he's coming. And so I just waited. And long story short, I was looking the other direction, and I was sitting this road. It's this old track, and it's so thick that my shooting lane's on the road. But I could see back in the brush, but I had this big Chiave. But he came down the trail that's right in my blind spot, and he didn't make any noise. He didn't talk at all. And he walked right in front of me at 30 yards and popped out of the brush at 30 yards while I was looking the other direction, a 30 plus inch buck, like a big buck. And I could do nothing. I mean, I'm sitting there, my bow's not even pointed that direction at the time. And so what he did is he hopped out of the brush, and he like fast walked through the open. He paused for a second and looked down the road, and then he like trotted to the other side and like stopped in the thick brush. So like he knows, right? He knows they feel safe in the thicks, and then when they're in the open, he's nervous. This is an old mature buck. This is what they do. And he was by himself. He didn't have any does with him. So looking back at that failure, that missed opportunity, because this was an old mature deer, and he was, big old thick neck and black face, and he didn't have good forks up top. It's not like he was like the specimen of a rack, but he was this old mature buck that we're looking for. But they just move so differently, and he was by himself. And I know if I were to like call to him because he was by himself, I could have called him in. But it's just amazing. Kind of going back and like what you're saying with the bears, it's just like these small windows that you can, if you're not like on your game 100% of the time, it just ends up being a missed opportunity. And it's unfortunate, but that's bow hunting too. And it's a learning experience. And so, yeah, it humbles you. It makes you sharper. It makes you want it even more. And attention to detail is heightened, from then on out. That was like the first couple days. And I think that ultimately, drives me to hunt harder and be smarter and just really key up my senses. And it paid off, right? I killed some great bucks further on, but ultimately missed opportunity because I'm a lazy human is what it came down to.
Man, that resonates so much with me. It's like as much experience as we have, we just still make mistakes, and those animals are so crafty, and they're looking to survive and make moves. And at the time, I mean, mistake, yeah, or missed opportunity, yeah, but I mean, you were looking the other way, and he stepped out, and then you didn't really have a move to make at that point. Like then you were already cooked. I mean, maybe you could have paid attention to where you thought he was going to come because you just heard him call before. And like you say, it sharpened your skills and honed you in, where you killed a couple great bucks and came back for it. But yeah, man, that attention to detail. And then like, it reminds me of like your ability to adapt on a stock. Like that chocolate, originally I saw him and I thought I'd come around from the left side. And then I got over there and the wind was coming down the draw, even though it was afternoon, but it was overcast. And so I had to approach on the right side. And when I approached on the right side, it kept my wind right the whole way, And so just like that little adapting just a little bit. But yeah, same thing, man. I just like those little mistakes. They make me more focused and more dialed in. And they it's like here I'm just trying to find a big bear and get into bow range and kill him. And it's like, oh, it's not that easy, man. It's like you find one and you get there and he's there. And boy, you got to have all the details right. And I had another encounter where I had my buddy flagging for me, which actually or ultimately I think messed me up, because I had gone up. He was in the perfect spot and I went up there, and then the wind got dicey up there going for him. And so I had to kind of charge up the hill and kind of change around my wind. And we had a system where if the orange was up, it meant the bear was still in the spot. And if the orange was down, it meant I can't see the bear anymore. Now, we came up with a more sophisticated system. Now, the pack to the right means that the bears move to the right. The orange is still up. Pack to the left means it moves to the, so we have like this system, but it's real rudimentary that we had cooked up 2 minutes before I left. And so I got over there and I saw the oranges up and I'm like, oh, he's still there. And it would have been easy to just work up the draw. And that's the way I wanted to go with him. I thought the wind would be coming down the draw. Well, I got over there and it was dicey. So I had to kind of climb the hill. And man, he said it was a big jet black that I've been trying for. I've seen him a couple times. He's a great big bear. So he started working up the hill and started hunting towards where I thought he was. And I could look up the draw to where he was, and he wasn't there anymore. And I'm like, oh, he went around the corner. And I glass back up and I see orange and I see the pack just to the right. And I'm like, oh, he went up around the corner of that draw. He's right up in there. So get my wind right. And I start approaching and I'm looking around for the bear for sure. And then, you know, I come up and I sneak up to the spot and he's not there. And I'm like, oh, man. And I glass up. There's no orange up there. So that means the bear's gone. And I'm like, oh, man. I'm like, I must have caught my wind. Like it got dicey in the draw. I tried to come up and above. Dang, maybe I should have came higher and circled more around, like gave myself more of a buffer. And like once I got there, I started puffing my wind checker and he was just in a bowl where like 3 draws intersected. And so it was like a little bit dicey in there. So no orange. I kind of walk back to the pack. I mean, I'm pouting a little bit, you know, it's like this super long go. I got a huge walkout, fatigued leg. I've been hunting for 3 days straight just on these huge sends. And I walk back and get my pack and start hiking out of there. And I get back and my buddy is like, dude, you were like, that bear was right there in bow range a couple times. He says, I dropped my pack and I started up the hill and the bear had actually worked up the hill. Now, I should have known this, right? Because I saw where this bear went the last time he was in there and he worked up the hill into this park. But he said, I skirted right below the bear where he was right over the mound, almost in bow range. And right as I got back, the bear came over and was dang near in bow range of my pack, as now I'm stalking up the draw to where he used to be. Now, when I see the orange gone, I'm like, the bear's gone. But my buddy just couldn't see him from the vantage point, but he had never spooked. And so as I'm walking down the draw back to my pack and back out of there, that bear is actually feeding on that green hillside, and he's a jet black bear. Like I'd like to say that I'm looking around, but I think I'm kind of pouting walking down the draw, and I see no orange, so I think the bear's gone. I think my wind spooked him. Instead of just keeping my focus, continuing to hunt, like going to look up by the aspens where he went last time, I see the orange gone, and I'm like, well, I saw him spook. Instead of like, if I wouldn't have had orange or flagging, I would have kept hunting, or like I should have kept my focus more, but I just lost focus and made a mistake, you know, and here I am zigging and zagging around this bear and maybe should have seen him on my hike out, but didn't see the orange and thought he was gone. And so I'm not really glassing and looking like I should. Like you say, the devil is in the details on these things, man, and it just kills me. But, you know, it's only going to make me better. I'm only going to focus in more. And now the last couple weeks, like I'm just going so hard to try to get an opportunity again. But yeah, man, it's tough out there.
It is. It is. And like you're describing, it's amazing because bow hunting, spot and stock bow hunting bears, I don't think there's anything like it. Like the challenge that it presents is unlike anything you'll ever hunt. You know, they're not calling, they're not making noise, they're usually not moving much. And, you know, you're looking for a needle in a haystack. These things aren't running around in herds or even pairs if you're lucky, if there's a boar and a sow, you know, courting. But talk about a challenge. And that's why we do it. Like you're saying, you know, we chase bears and chase, you know, animals that challenge us to the extreme, to max levels, because we can pick apart our weaknesses, we can get better. And then when it's go time in September, you know, making deer and elk hunting seem easy. I mean, that's the idea. That's the goal. And let me tell you, it works.
It does work. Yeah. Experience is just such a good teacher. And, you know, we're just really fortunate that we've structured our lives where we get to bow hunt so much. So getting this experience in the spring is like crucial. And, you know, I've been bow hunting a long time, but I'm still getting better. I'm still a student of the game. I still make mistakes. There's a lot of years where I kill the first bear I'm after and I feel like a hero. And now I've had like 4 or 5 goes on it, and I still haven't killed one. I did pass a blonde the other day in bow range, which was, you know, that felt good to be in bow range and pass up. It was a boar, just wasn't quite what I was looking for. But yeah, it sharpens our skills. And the same thing, dude, like you've been to New Zealand this year hunting reds, you've been hunting axis, and you have been in so much action. Like, dude, you're a better bow hunter today than you were last year when you killed your 350 bull. Like, you're still honing your skills and getting better and learning from your mistakes. And I'm the same way, man. There's just like no limit to how effective and efficient, how good of a bow hunter, how good at stalking, and just believing. Like you say, there's not that many bears out there, but I just believe in my vantage points, believe in my drainages. And I mean, a lot of these bears, I'm picking up 2.5, 3 hours, 3.5 hours into my sits, just knowing that there's bears in there and sign in there and that I will see them, just like the confidence in it. So yeah, man, we're still improving. Like I still want to get better. I still duffed a lot of opportunities this year, so I really need to focus in. But yeah, you're a better bow hunter now than you were when you killed your giant bull last year.
And that's the ultimate goal, and that's one of the reasons why I started doing all the off-season hunting. With this, I burned 17 points in Montana. I mean, this is my Super Bowl. This is my one shot. I'm a non-resident now. When I go up to Montana and hunt elk, in my mind, the only reason that I will fail at killing a really big bull is because of factors that are out of my control. And that's probably private land or weather or hunter pressure. But I can tell you what, I'm going to be ready. My equipment's going to be ready. My thought process is going to be ready. My mindset's ready. My arrows, every little last detail that I have control of, I'm going to be ready, and I want to be at the top of my game. And so ultimately, that's why I'm doing this. Obviously, I love adventure bow hunting, and every bow hunt, every adventure is spectacular, especially traveling outside the state and outside the country even too. Adventure in its own, but ultimately it's preparation for my Super Bowl of an elk tag in Montana this year. That's why I'm doing it. I got to be the best that I can be to make the most of that tag, because honestly, that tag will probably never come around again for me. It's a once in a lifetime. And so it's something that I do not want to waste.
Man, 100%. Well, you're doing all the right things for sure. I'm pumped for you. It's going to be an incredible hunt. You really have a chance at a true giant. And I know you've burned a lot of points towards it. And yeah, I bet from here on out, like, I think you got another trip you're taking off on here quick. But for the most part now, it's just training and preparation and getting ready for that hunt, I would imagine, like trying to get everything right for it, huh?
Yeah. And the one thing, and once again, why we do it, but in Hawaii, I noticed what I think is a weakness of myself. And this axis buck, he kind of got spooked, and he came to me. They got bumped from somewhere else, and he came to me. And so it was somewhat frantic, moving quick. And, I'm getting my range and I'm getting cover. And so I had to make a really quick shot. And this buck stopped at 60. I think it was 61 is what I ranged him. So I set my sight at 60, and I drew back. I had a short window because he was keyed up, but he was looking the other direction. And I put my pin on his shoulder and fired. And, elk hunting, I think that's bad juju. Any bow hunting, that's bad juju. Yes. I mean, sometimes you're going to be rushed, but what that told me was, my brain, when we're rushed, and this is very difficult, and we're getting into the nitty gritty of things, but it's very difficult to master that when you're in a rush and you have to make things happen, but to like really pick a spot and have a clear mind of where you want that arrow to go. And so I released the arrow, and it was lower light, and I hit the buck, and he was chugging out of there. He went 50 yards, cloud of dust down for the count. Awesome, right? High fives. I get up to him, and the arrow actually had passed in front of the shoulder and like basically just went through the jugular. And so obviously rapid blood loss. He was down for the count, but that's not where I wanted to hit that buck. And that could have been an easy miss too. And on a bull elk, if you hit the wrong portion of the bone there in the shoulder, that's a failure, right? And so what that told me is, like, this summer I need to get out and I need to shoot more 3D. I've been lacking on shooting 3D, and I need to get myself into rushed scenarios. So say there you have a 3D target out there, and I'll go through a course. Cody, down here in Cody, Wyoming, there's a great 3D course. But what I'll do is, I'll go through this course and I won't have everything dialed. I'll basically be looking in the other direction, and I'm going to give myself 20 seconds, and I need to turn around. I need to get my range. I need to rush my shot, right? So that's what I'm simulating, and program my brain a little bit to stay off that shoulder and pick a spot, especially elk hunting, because right, you just want to, in bow hunting, you want to give yourself room for error, right? You need to factor that in. And when you start creeping too close to that front shoulder, or holding on the shoulder like I did on that axis buck, which I do for deer, it's shooting them in the shoulders fine, I have enough power. But for elk, that's a no-no. Like I'm not going to be doing that. You can't hold on the shoulder. And so anyway, that's what I'm going to be working on this summer is picking my spots, shooting 3Ds, and staying off that shoulder, shooting different angles, and just the attempt to train my brain a little bit more in those rush scenarios to stay behind the shoulder. There's no downside with these evolution high broadheads, the big cut diameter. Like if you hit anywhere in that soft spot, it's over. Yeah, I mean you got them with that hybrid broadhead. So that's ultimately what I need to focus on, and it definitely keeps me driven. It keeps me on a mission this summer to really focus on some of the finer details, because man, as you know, when you're rushed, shit can hit the fan quick, for lack of better terms, and you're either going to make the shot or you're not. And if you're not 100% confident and you don't put your homework in, you're probably going to fail in those rush scenarios.
Yeah. That's why you're such a good bow hunter, man. It's like you're really looking at your bow hunting objectively and looking for your weak links, your weaknesses in your game. Even though you're a stellar bow hunter, you killed a couple great bucks, you came home a hero, you're still like looking at it and analyzing it and looking at it objectively, like really dropping your ego and go, what can I improve at? And that's like me, like a couple of these bears. It's like, okay, I need to realize, like, I've harvested a bunch of animals and been really successful, but I need to slow down a bit as I start getting closer. I just need to, like, if he's gone, that's fine. But, and there is a time to rush or get over the hill, or definitely when I'm first stalking, like a lot of these bears, they're miles away. I never see them close. And so like I'm running down the hill, running up the draw to close distance, and that's fine. But as I get close, to slow down, and then to keep my focus. If he's not right where I left him, keep my focus and keep still hunting, keep looking for him. Like, don't give up on it. And in the same way you're saying, like working on your game, like holding off that shoulder and then practicing rush shots. I think rush shots are some of the toughest ones to get a hold of. And it seems like the majority of my shots feel rushed. It's like, sure, I love it when that animal doesn't know I'm there and he's looking away from me and I can execute a good shot. But a lot of times it's like I finally get into bow range and all of a sudden that deer's looking at me and I have my chance to make my shot, but he's looking at me. He can spook at any time. Or that bull, like he's chasing a cow, but it seems like when you're in that close bow range, like you can only be there so long before the whole scenario is going to blow up. So it always feels like maybe it's 50-50, or I don't know what the exact percentages are, but there's a lot of times when that animal's looking at you or caught a little bit of draw movement, or they're just in range and that wind's going to swirl, where you do have that pressure moment on you, or that where it feels rushed. And like, for me, like I just like came to the conclusion, like it does me no good to miss him quickly. Like it's like I'm going to execute my best shot. I'm going to put the pin where it goes. I'm going to pull. I'm going to execute my best shot. And if that deer starts to move off, or that elk starts to move off before I can execute a good shot, well, it just is what it is. I'll continue hunting for him, but I'm not going to just fire a quick shot to miss that thing quickly. Like I am going to execute my best shot. And really the difference between a good and bad shot is a second for me. It's like not that big of a deal. But like you said, where I got caught is my pin would just barely find the spot and I'd punch it off, and then my shot isn't accurate. Instead of putting my pin and letting the movement slow and execute, it's like a second difference. And so like wrapping my brain around that. And now as you mention it, it's like, okay, yeah, I need to be thinking about that coming into season, and I need to remember that lesson and just make sure that I'm not firing a quick shot that isn't accurate. Like I still need to fire a real good, accurate shot on that animal, and just realizing in my visualizations when I'm visualizing what's going to happen that I am going to have some shots where that 6-point bull is going to be looking right at me, or that big muley is going to be looking at me ready to spook, and I still need to execute a good shot. I cannot rush it, and so I just that resonates with me as well, Dan.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic point. And we still, everybody has their process, right? That you need to go through, that you need to step through in your brain in that moment of truth, in crunch time. And yes, like you're describing, the faster that you can do that, the better for bow hunting. But you still have that process. If you skip things, if you guess on a yardage, or you try to wing it, or like, you look and you don't really have a clear shooting lane, you got some limbs and you're going to force it through there anyway, it's not going to work. And so there's still a process that you have to follow for it to be, successful once that arrow strikes or misses. And so that's so important when it comes to, rushing a shot. And maybe that's not the right terminology too. Maybe it's a hurried shot, and you don't want, you don't want to hurry anything. But like with this axis buck, I knew my window is small, and there's so many times in bow hunting that your window is so small, right? And so you're like thinking about being on your game, and you got your shooting lanes here, and you're doing all this anticipation to try to make it happen and just get ahead on those steps of your shot process. And ultimately that's what's so difficult, right? Because you spend, all this practice and at the range and all this prep, you spend the least amount of time in these small windows of pressure situation, and your experience comes from time, right? By doing something. And you can only get that rushed experience in the moment when you're bow hunting. And I'm going to try to recreate some of the stuff at the range this year, shooting 3D. But when you have a live animal out there looking at you, or maybe he's getting ready to leave, it's a different feeling. And you only get that experience by being in that moment. And time in that moment is what ultimately matters, right? For experience. And so, no, that's what it's all about. And it's hard to get that time of good experience in that moment. And that's why I like to really analyze my past successes and my past failures, or my past misses, of those few seconds in that moment. Because if I can focus on those and learn from those, that ultimately is what's going to make me a killer down the road, and really separate me from, maybe not punching your tag to punching your tag in the end, is really focusing and analyzing those moments of truth. So very important. And I don't think there's better practice than spring bear hunting, honestly, because it's so challenging. And, bears, you can fool their eyes, right? You can fool their ears half the time, but you can't fool their nose. And it seems like bears, when you're spot and stock hunting bears, they're in places where the wind is shifty. Like you're saying, it's dicey. It's so challenging. And there's easy ones you'll run across. I mean, you've killed a ton of bears with your bow too, and you've had easy ones where they're in a spot and the wind's blasting in your face or blasting in one direction, but the wind is just so shifty in the mountains, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so shifty. Yeah, it's well, I just wanted to touch. You explained that really well. Yeah, not rushed, but hurried. And we're talking about the same thing, it's like being able to make a quick shot. Yeah, it's like I just know that it's going to take me 5 seconds. Like you said, you have to run through your process, and it's a razor edge of like seizing your opportunity, as like these opportunities, especially on axis deer. It seems like they walk into a window and then walk out, or and they're really tough because they make you want to rush your shot, like not in a good way. They make you want to almost force arrows on them because they're only standing in a window for so long. And that's, all animals can be that way, really, when elk are rutting cows and when, bears are moving around feeding and never stop moving. And like, like they do, like they almost try to like trick your brain into like trying to force a shot instead of like trying to walk through. And I can't tell you how many animals I've been on full draw and they start to walk and I can't shoot, or they start to move. But I just know for me, like a hurried shot for me is like 5 seconds. I cannot shoot in 3 to 4 seconds. It's not going to happen. What's going to happen is my pin's going to find it and I'm going to punch it off and that arrow is going to be nowhere close. And I've made that mistake. So for me, it's like, yeah, I think you're right. Like you need to be able to walk through your process as quickly as possible. And like, yeah, like a normal shot for me takes 7 seconds, but I can execute a good shot in 5 seconds. I can walk through my process and execute a shot. So I think that's important to practice and to know where your limit is and not try to force it. And then, yeah, just like you say, like bears are such great practice in the spring, and so are axis, especially like dialing in the wind, man. It's like how many stalks get busted by the wind? It's like elk stalks, mule deer stalks. It's like if you could just take that one factor out of the equation, there'd be a lot more dead animals, And so like just like the axis on Hawaii, like you're hunting, man, those winds are so tough to dial in. They can be so light, they can come in different directions. It's like really tough to dial in. And bears the same way. It's like I've had a couple nights where I've had good winds but it's just fickle in the mountains. And like you say, some of the places they're at, it just swirls around and there's nothing more frustrating than making a couple mile big move on a bear and you get over there and you're checking your wind checker and it's just going all 4 directions at different times. You're like, what am I supposed to do with this? And it's tough to back out or it's tough to be patient. But ultimately, like, if I make a big go, I'm going to try to dial in that wind to the best of my abilities. And hopefully I catch a good wind and I can call what the wind should be doing and I get over there and it's behaving like it should. But it seems like there's always a few variables in that wind that take like this adaptation when you get over there. It's like, okay, I get over there, it should be coming down the draw, but it's kind of slicing down the hill and down the draw now. Okay, I got to make an approach from the bottom side or vice versa. And so, yeah, like hunting and stalking these bears, getting these plays I have, like this is really helping me with the winds and will come into play this elk season, this mule deer season. It's going to help me just have more confidence around these winds and what they're doing, like being able to adapt on the fly, on a stalk, on my approach. Like all of a sudden I thought I was going to come in from the left, but now I got to come in from the right because the wind's more consistent. Okay, that's fine. I can still find my spot. I can still get there and sneak to that spot. Like that's going to be clutch come season. And if you're just like trying to dial all this bow hunting insight and instincts in on the first 6-point bull you see of the season, it's like you're going to be behind the game. And just like you talked on those axis deer, you made that mistake 2 days in and then you killed a couple bucks later in the hunt. Like, spending that time hunting axis, chasing them, dialing in the wind, you got better as the hunt went on. You focused in more. And so like getting this experience now or getting this experience on antelope or does or on Kel elk or just being in the woods a lot for elk season in the early season, even though that might not be the best hunting, you're getting chances to be around elk and make plays and dial in wind. Like all that stuff will factor in when you finally get your chance at that great big 6-point, I feel like.
Yep, absolutely. And going back to the wind a little bit, in the deer collective, and for you guys that don't know, the Eastmans online mule deer course is now called the Deer Collective. It's the same thing. It's a video driven course. Thanks for you guys that have took advantage of that anchor code and subscribe to the Elk Collective and the Deer Collective. But in those courses we talk about the rule, the what the wind does in the mountains and some of the basics and, with thermals and sun on the hill and, shade on the hill and what happens. But I want to hear, you said that this bear that you stalked on, you got over there and you were going to come up a draw below him, but the wind wasn't doing what you thought it was supposed to do. So what happened? Like, what was the wind doing? You analyzed the ridge, where the bear was. And so I take it you had maybe some shade to work with and you had the draw, that wind's going to be sinking down the draw, but it wasn't. So walk us through what was going on with the wind there, because this sounds like an exception of the rule of what wind normally does in the mountains.
Yeah, 100%, man. It's so I made a play on this bear. It was let's see, what time was it? This was going to be like towards afternoon, evening. It was an overcast day and pretty shaded and getting later. I predicted that the wind was going to be coming down the draw in a thermal wind. And the deal is I got over there and it was coming down the draw as I started up the bottom end. It was sinking down that draw. But then I got up there and it just got dicey where it was coming then down the hill from my right side. And then it was also swirling and going up the draw. And so what this was, Dan, is it's a huge basin with a draw that comes down in it. So, you know, this undulation and in these mountains, that wind, we had a strong directional that day. And so it was getting into that basin and it was swirling around that basin. And that's what was changing the wind direction around. And so really, I couldn't count on the thermal wind being steady because the thermal wind was doing what I thought it should do, but the directionals were overpowering it in this draw and in this swirl of this wind. And so when I got down in there and I didn't have a steady wind, I started just checking and trying to find the dominant direction and which way it was going to go and which way it was going to head. And really, I found that with that directional wind, the way it was swirling around that basin, that actually my better wind was coming up the draw and then coming to the left and coming to the right, but mostly heading up the draw. And I also found that every once in a while, I get a thermal wind that would come down. And so I actually had all four directions of this wind, which is going to be dicey, right? But what I thought is, okay, what I need to do is I need to get on the side hill above the draw, above this bear. And then when I get the downhill thermal, it's blowing like down the draw, down this hillside. And so it's actually like above the bear because I'm not in the draw and it's blowing down the draw, not sucking to the bottom of the draw and pulling out. And then when the directionals would blow, I'd have an uphill or an up left or an up right. So if I can approach off that side hill and come in above that side hill and then come in and keep my elevation above that bear and come in, like I could actually dial in all four winds to where it was right. And so I got to play this out. And then like as I went up and through there, I was able to check it the whole way. And it's like, okay, it's not sucking down the hill. It's pulling down the draw. Okay, I'm good there. Okay, and now the directionals are blowing and it's swirling around this basin. Okay, when the directionals are going, it's going uphill to the left and to the right, but I'm high enough on the hill, like I'm above the wind plane of this bear down below. So it's a little bit complicated to try to articulate with words or whatever, but it's just like this experience with winds and trying to dial it in where I got there and it wasn't what I wanted or wasn't what I expected. And I was able to adapt and actually keep the wind correct for the stock on this bear, even though it was coming all four directions.
Yeah, man, that's the ultimate challenge in the mountains, you know, with these directionals and then the thermals. And I'm guessing, so was there a front coming in or maybe leaving? Were the directionals somewhere from the west?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the southwest. Yep.
So you were on like a northeast face where this bear was in the shade where that green grass is. And we talk about this too in the Deer Collective. I mean, it's typical mountain hunting, right? Is you have a directional, and you know, for us, especially in the summer and fall, the wind's coming from the southwest or the west. That's where most of our weather comes from. So those east-facing slopes or those east basins, you get a lot of the mixing in the, you know, the direction of the wind all over the place, and that's one reason why I like to, if I can, I avoid like east facing basins when I'm hunting mule deer in the high country, because you just find so much of the wind is mixing more often than not compared to like a west side or a south side where you have more of the directionals to work with. So it is the ultimate challenge is playing the wind on the backside of a topographical feature that's blocking the prevailings. And then you have the, you know, the thermals and the prevailings mixing. It's a challenge. And usually that ends up as blown stocks. I mean, in my experience.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's it. I have had a couple nights where it is good wind, like I called it, where it's right in my face, and those are really nice. And it's weird too. You can be like in the bottom and the wind's doing one thing, and you climb up the hill and all of a sudden you find a steady wind. like the wind is going to change like as you move around the feature, as you move like up the ridge line or up the side hill. It's like all of a sudden you got out of that mixing and now you've got a dominant wind that's blowing in your face or whatever. And so you can also change the wind by your approach, or like sometimes I'll be in a little depression and the wind's doing one thing and it's like, well, I really got to get to the top of this ridge to see what the wind's doing there, because I can't really get a read right in here. It's swirling around. And yeah, as bad as the wind was that night, it was like kind of try to make something happen as I was all the way over there. And it definitely wasn't a good scenario. And on a big muley buck or on any animal, really, it probably would have been smart to back out and wait for a different day to stalk. And I thought the wind was going to be better. And so you're trying to make the best of it when you're in there. But like you said, more times than not, you end up blowing up that bear, blowing up that stalk where it's just like, man, it isn't worth it. You'd be better off to back out and to keep on that animal and get a play during a better, more consistent wind, or wait till later as the directionals started to calm down and the thermals really started to come down that hill. So that probably would have been the smarter play in that situation.
Yeah. That's why I love those nice high pressure, sunny days. If you can get no wind or little wind, that high pressure is built in and there's not much mixing in the atmosphere. And then you get those really still evenings, and then you really have those thermals to play with in the evening and the morning. And it makes your life a lot easier for sure, especially bear hunting, right? I mean, well, any bow hunting in the mountains, but for bears, I love those bluebird days, those still days, especially if you have some green grass, to kind of cover, you're not breaking limbs or you're not crunching through dead brown grass or, something like that. You can have a quiet approach, because when it's quiet out there, I mean, it's quiet, especially with two guys. You know how it is when you got a camera guy, you're hunting with two guys trying to get into bow range. Yeah, that ain't easy. That ain't easy.
That's what I've noticed too, is just like really slowing down. I got to get back out the stalking shoes. I kill a lot of animals in my tennis shoes, and it seems like I can move slow enough and quiet enough. And if you have a little wind noise, great. But boy, when it gets still like that, trying to stalk on an animal, that's another scenario where you're almost better off to wait for some afternoon winds, like just to cover your approach noise. It's like so tough to be quiet, especially like stalking mule deer and stuff when it's still and in that still air. Like, man, they've got those huge ears. They can just hear you coming. And so, I need to pay attention to that. And then I found out I drew a Colorado high country tag, I think just yesterday or day before. So I'm headed back to the high country, which is my Super Bowl for a big muley buck up there, and really pumped to get back in there. But yeah, I'm going to break out like I've, stockasins and socks. They work fine to be quiet, but I have really tender feet, and so socks like just suck for me. It's like with the rocks and the pebbles, and then also they're so slick on the grass, and then they kind of slide on your feet as you make moves. And so I'm not really a sock guy, and stockasins work for some guys, but that slick leather, it seems like I'll fall flat on my butt trying to go down a grassy hillside or something, and especially in that steep terrain. And so like what I really like is like a really minimalist running shoe, like some of those old style minimalist running shoes. So I'm going to get those out again. They have rubber on the bottom. And so, maybe it's not quite as quiet as going barefoot, but man, I can just feel the terrain, and it sticks to rocks, it sticks to grass, and really pick my way down those slopes. But I kind of like, after being picked out by that bear, going through the dead grass with two guys, it kind of brings it to the forefront of my mind as like stalking these things. Man, I got to be at my very, very best. And noise definitely alerts them to your presence. And if they hear you coming or they hear something, they don't really forget about you. Like they hear it, and then they may go back to feeding, but they're listening in your direction. And then when they hear it a second time, it's all over, or they hear it and now they're looking in your direction, and maybe you're approaching blind or something. And it just alerts them to like your presence. And so I'm going to work hard at like being really quiet on my approaches, just like trying to keep that element of surprise, not let them know I'm stalking them. I'm sure you ran into that in Hawaii, making moves on axis.
Yep. As much green grass as there was in some of these areas, there's a lot of dead stuff too. And those flowers over there, those daisies, we missed the flower bloom, obviously, because all there was were stalks and the spiky ball heads, and in some of these areas that we were hunting. and talk about just like little like crunchy, they're like chopsticks sticking out. They break really easy and they're really tight together. You're trying to, I mean, there's no sneaking through them. And so yeah, and like you say, it's probably the hardest place in the lower 48 to be quiet is hunting high country mule deer, just because of the steepness factor and the terrain. And like you said, with, you know, the stalker skins or any of the other, you know, stalker boots that you can put on the, you know, or whether you're in your socks or whatnot, gravel, that's what always has gotten me in the high country of like trying to be quiet. Cause like you get these slopes and gravel and you're like just sliding a little bit, just like, like it's loud, right? And I don't care what you're wearing, it's tough. It's tough. So I find myself doing a lot of rock hopping, and it's like, man, I need a little bit more on my bottoms of my feet for soles than, you know, a pair of stocking socks if you're rock hopping. So it's challenging. It really is. It really is.
Yeah, that's so funny, Dan. Yeah, it just reminds me of like trying to hop from rock to rock because they're actually quiet and your feet stick to them, or trying to hold yourself up with some grass. And you're right, that gravel is just a killer when you're trying to stalk on those things. You know, you're trying so hard to be quiet. And I've just found like the best is to let those afternoon winds come up. They just cover a lot of the approach noise, and that seems to really help. And so, you know, sometimes if it's really still, is just waiting for that, those afternoon winds, which really help with your approach. And then I learned some good lessons, like where you're at in Hawaii, is like using hard trails. Like trails while you're elk hunting, trails while you're axis hunting, like you're doing, like really picking out those trails on your approach. And even if they're bringing you in 10 or 20 yards uphill or downhill of where you want to approach, it's better to be on those hard trails, as those trails, you can actually be quiet on that dirt because they're worn down from the animals or from the elk. And so that's like a really good lesson that I learned out there in Hawaii, that then now I apply to my elk hunting, to my deer hunting. It's like, if you can get on a trail, it'll move you through the brush quietly. And so that's really important too, is like to be able to adapt on your stalk and find those hard trails.
That's huge. They're little sidewalks that take you to where you want to go. And like you say, they might not be exactly where you want to go, but I used to do the same thing. And, you know, if I was like, oh, this is the route I want to take here, and I would like take it, but it'd be noisy. And then it's just like, okay, you got these little sidewalks here that are just beat down. It's like walking on concrete, and you can tiptoe down these things silently. It's like, okay, yeah, that I learned that lesson quite a while ago too. Like just taking the trails, and that's the beauty of Hawaii. You know, you're dealing with, you know, high animal numbers, so trails are usually pretty beat down and worn. So yeah, you're just trail running, you know, when you're stalking and moving through country, because it's so much quieter.
How is the heat out there?
It was hot. Yeah, it was hot. The first couple days we were mid 80s, but you know, high humidity, so it's hot. And then it did cool back down, high 70s and 80 for probably the highs. After that storm blew, it rained a bunch right before we got there, so it was kind of a mixing of the winds. And then the trades came back, and you know, we had that nice 18-mile-an-hour wind out of the east. And yeah, it's just money if you get into some of these areas that I've hunted in the past, and it's just set up so beautifully for the trade winds. And I love a good strong wind out there. Like you said, it just silence your approach, and they're not going to smell you. And in some of the areas that I hunt, and that's a benefit of hunting your same areas year after years, because you pick up on these things, you learn these things of what the wind does when you're in these areas. And so it's like, okay, if there's deer in there, they're freaking in trouble because I have a stellar wind and I know my approach. Like I'm probably going to be launching an arrow, and that's huge, right? I mean, that's huge. If you can go into spots like that, that really ups your success rate.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I know I'm going into an elk spot here in Montana that I've hunted a bunch, and I've hunted it enough to where I know, like, I can look on the forecast of what the winds are going to be doing, and then that's going to dictate how I'm going to hunt that drainage. It's going to dictate which drainages I'm going to hunt. It's like, oh, I got a north wind today, I can hunt this side of the range or whatever, and I can get over here and I'm going to have a good wind. And so I think like learning those winds and where you're hunting can definitely come into effect. Like where you said, yeah, I'm probably going to arrow a deer today. And same thing with me elk hunting. It's like, oh man, I finally got a north wind. I'm going to go hunt these drainages I want to hunt because it'll be consistent and steady, and I'll be able to get in on them if they're in there, you know? And so I think dialing in those winds and knowing which areas are going to hunt good with a good wind. And same thing with the high country. It's like, you know, looking at that forecast, and he may be on the lee wind side and there's no approach and it's a dicey wind on that thing. And all of a sudden I get a day where that wind switches around. It's like, oh, I can hunt that buck today. Now he's on the dominant wind side, you know? So I think really paying attention to it and being able to strategize your hunt with it makes a big difference as well.
That's where those notes come into play from years prior, right? Because some of those little details like you're talking about, you forget them, you know, year after year, unless you're hunting the same spot like for a decade. But that's why it's pretty important in this day and age, I feel like, because, you know, a lot of especially if you're a non-resident, you're not hunting the same spots year after year. You might get a tag once every 3 or 4 years. And so if you have a little bit of notes to reflect on, you know, this day it was this temp and the wind was blowing out of, you know, this direction, this approach was good, or stay at it. Like I do that. I need to do it more. I don't do it as much as I should. But when I remember stuff and I have these tags that I know I can get every few years, I'll do it because I'm coming back, you know, and that little tidbit of information that you can have from years prior is huge. It's huge.
Dude, you're so right. Yeah, I've taken notes. I'm definitely going to reflect upon my notes before hunting these areas this year. And then, in fact, as soon as I get off this podcast, I'm going to order a couple more of those little notebooks that I can carry. And I'm going to be better this year at taking notes, because you're right. It comes into play on the hunt and can be the difference between filling a tag and not. Like, knowledge is power. And when you can remember all those details, like you say, you forget them, you can't remember everything. But when you can reflect back on some notes and look through it, it's just going to put you ahead of the game. So definitely going to review my notes, going to be better at this year at taking more notes, writing more important information down. So when I hunt these places in the future, I'm like better prepared for them.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yep. Well, right on, man. Congrats again on those bucks and a great trip to Hawaii. Yeah, you've just been bow hunting a bunch lately, which is really cool to hear about. And it puts everything in the forefront of your brain because you're bow hunting so much. And so then it makes you think of all these little things that you can't think of unless you're bow hunting, which makes for like really good podcasts and conversation. So congrats again on those bucks, buddy. I really appreciate you.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, man.
Okay.